Hi friends, Tiffany here. Welcome to my quilting life. In today's video, we're not making what's on the wall. We're going to make something else. Don't mind that. Anyways, so as you could tell, my string bin, it doesn't even close. It doesn't close. This is the string bin. We are going to make a fun string project. That's going to take a while because it's strings and we are going to use paper as the foundation to put all our strings together. So for today's project, if you want to make a super big quilt that's like 96 by 100, then you're on the right video. Of course, you don't have to make it that big. You can use less pieces. So for today's quilt, obviously, you need a string bin. Mine is overflowing. It's time to use it. Secondly, you need 2 1/4 yards of a solid or a print or something that shines against all, that you can see against all of your strings. So I'm going with white, but you can use black, green, purple, yellow, whatever color you want. I'm using white. 2 1/4 yards, you're going to cut into 32, that's 3, 2, 32 2.5-inch strips, and then we're going to subcut these into 8-inch segments. But for now, here's my strips. Then you're going to need 160 phone book pages. You don't have to use phone book pages. I am using phone book pages because my phone book pages are like 7, almost 7 by almost 11. We're going to trim these down. So if you want to use regular paper, just grab a big, huge stack of regular paper or newspaper or paper, just whatever kind of paper you have. That's a rectangle because we're going to turn these into a 6.5 by 10.5-inch block. Whew, that's a lot, right? So I only need 160 pages, but technically I'm just going to have this whole entire thing as a stack because I'm going to cut out my white. That will help me keep 160 of these. So, and I know it's really hard to find a phone book these days, but I mean, if you dig in your junk drawer or underneath something in a cupboard, I'm pretty sure you're going to find a phone book. I'm pretty sure. Everybody has one. It's somewhere in your house. So this is my strings bin. It is overflowing, and I actually have more than this, but this is what's in this bin, and this is what I'm going to use today. So there's, I'm going to say thousands of different strings in here. Some of them are repeats, obviously. I'm going to still use repeats in this project because I'm making 160 blocks, and well, you know, it's just going to be one of those things where it's going to have repeats, but that's okay. We're going to use them up. So again, one more time, 2 1/4 yards of a background, and we're going to cut that into 2.5-inch strips. You need 32 of them, and then we're going to subcut them. We're going to open them up and subcut them into 8-inch strips, and you're going to get 5 8-inch pieces per strip. So that's going to give you 160. Then you're going to need your phone book paper or any kind of paper that you can make into a rectangle that is, right now it's about 7-ish by 11-ish, but we're going to be trimming it to 6.5 by 10.5. I'm going to leave them this size until they're all made, then trim them down. So if you want to get 7-ish by 11-ish inch paper, that works. And then we'll trim it all down. And then I'm going to show you how to make this block because obviously I don't have a pattern for you, and we are pretty much improvising the whole entire thing, sort of. We're going to make a center part, and then we're going to grow our blocks around that. So I'm done talking. I'm just going to bring the camera down, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing, and I'm going to cut up all of my white and then move on. So let's cut the white up first. Here we go. I'm not going to cut all that up right now. I cut enough to start. This is going to take me a while, like I said. So once I get all through this, I'll cut some more, keep going. And if I'm making too much, because technically sometimes I don't get the measurements right, if I'm making too much, I could always make a secondary quilt or throw this on the back. But I'm pretty sure my calculations are sort of correct. I'm not sure. Anyways, we're going to start with 4 pieces of paper because this 4 pieces of paper is going to make a single block. And what I'm going to do is move paper, grab box, and start. So let's just move this out of the way, move that out of the way. Make sure that blade is closed because, you know, I didn't this morning and I sliced my finger. Here's strings. Gotta have strings, gotta have a machine. It's fully threaded. Now this is not an exact science. This is a scrap quilt, a string scrap quilt. So we're gonna take 4 of our 2.5 by 8 inch whites, just like this, and like that. And we're gonna put them in 4 corners, facing out. Honestly, if they're not straight, I'm pretty sure you can see this because it's white on top of the paper. If they're not straight, we don't care. We are going to be sewing and creating star points. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to kind of lay these on here. It doesn't matter if they are straight. All I'm going for is for my square to cross over the paper right here in the corner, and then it can go any which direction you want as long as the center of this strip, this 2.5 by 8 inch piece, is somewhere in the center right here. So I'm going to lay that there, and we are going to grab strings that are long enough. So we need to make sure that's not long enough. So we're going to start with long strings. Come on, long strings, where are you? Here's one. So I'm going to take this long string and I'm going to put it right sides together, but I'm going to angle it. So let's bring the camera down so that I can show you. We're going to start with 1 block and then I'll move on from there. I'm going to bring the camera down and show you how I'm going to do this. Okay, here we are. So if you want to throw a pin in here, let me just bring the pins out so that we can make sure that you guys get the general idea of how this is going. We're going to take a single pin and I'm just going to place it about right there because I could sew over it if I need to, but we try not to. And I'm going to take my first piece and I'm going to lay it on here, but I'm going to lay it on here crooked like this. So it's coming towards the center. So about right like this, okay? And it's crossing the whole entire paper from corner to corner. And what I'm going to do is we're going to knock this pin out. This is where I want it to lay right here. And I'm going to throw that pin in here just like this. And I'm going to use this straight edge of the piece that I added as my sewing edge. So I'm going to start down here. I'm going to sew on this by going past this all the way to the end. So let's go to the machine. And we're going to turn my piece of paper and I'm going to use that as my 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to sew. We're going to change our stitch length to about a 1.5, 1.8, just so the paper rips off really easily. I'm just going to sew. I'm going to move that pin now slightly. And I have seam to cross over completely. So my paper is wanting to rip already. That means I'm really have a tight seam. So it's going to rip off really easily. But I'm going to try not to rip it. All right, so now I'm going to press this back just like this. And again, it's ripping off of there. We don't want that, so I'm going to assume that I can get my next piece on without ripping that. So I'm going to press it at the iron real quick. That way that stitch line is hidden. The next piece is going to cover over it anyway. All right, so I'm going to take this to the iron and I'm going to press this back. Okay, once it's pressed back, I'm going to make sure that that's sticking on top of the paper. And we are going to grab another really long piece. Let's see if this one's long enough. Oh, and it is. So now I'm going to cross over. This is going to cross over up here. And this is going to cross over down here, just like this. I'm going to come down just a little. It doesn't need to be that high. Come here and come to here. So you can see crossing over the paper and crossing over right here to where I'm creating a point like this and like that and coming to this end. I'm going to go ahead and pin this in place. And now I'm going to change my stitch length to a 1.8 instead, or around that. Now I'm going to stitch this on. Let's hope that that stays in place using that new piece as the edge. Phone book paper rips more easier than any other paper, so that's why I'm using it. It's easier to clean up. All right, I have sewn to that end. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm just going to cut this off right here because I don't need it. So that string can go back in the bin. And I'm going to go ahead and now fold this back, and I have created a point and crossed my paper. So I'm going to take this to the iron and iron it back. I go ahead now and just trim that off. All right, so I have an add a quarter ruler that I'm going to go ahead now and fold this back and trim off all this excess to get rid of the bulk. So here's my add a quarter ruler. Just going to line it up right here. Make my cut. And then get rid of all the excess, and my paper came off with it, go figure. I don't really need those pieces. All right, so this one's going to get pressed back. I'm going to reopen this back up, trying to keep my paper together. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the excess on the opposite side. I'm going to carefully fold that back. We should have done that in the first place, but I was so excited to, do this. I'm hoping that my paper stays together. I'm only getting rid of this little section right here. Everything else stays up there. Open it up. And we're going to continue sewing on our nicely crooked paper because it decided to rip. All right, there we go. So there is that. Now we're going to grab another string. This one crosses over the whole entire thing. So now I'm just going to add this way and add this way. So I'm going to take this over to the machine now. I'm going to sew this one on. All right, so the same procedure. I'm just going to press it back like this. And then I'm going to use the iron and give it a little no steam, just a nice little press. Let's see if I can get this paper to stay there though. It's getting crooked on me. All right, so I'm going to press that. And then I'm going to add to the other side. I'm just making sure all the pieces are long enough to cover, and they are. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that one on. And then press it back. So this is all we're doing, just like this. Again, I'm going to find a piece for this other side. Again, this is foundation paper piecing. So I'm going to press that back, add another. It's nice to have a pressing station next to you for this kind of project. this on this side. So I sew just beyond the paper. The rest of it's going to get trimmed off, and most of that will go into crumbs. So I'm going to press that. It always looks like a gigantic mess every time I make stuff like this, but that is okay. All right, so I'm going to grab another piece. You know what? This is going to cover the whole thing. Oh, this one will cover the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and put this piece on here on this side. And your strings could be any size you want. Oh, I ran out of bobbin. Okay, so my wonderful paper piece fell off, but if it was on there still, then it is fully covered now. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. Press that. And then I'm going to cover this other side. So we can do 2 pieces to cover it, or 1 big piece. It don't really matter. So I'm going to go with 2 pieces. All right, so I just need 1 more little piece. I'll just use this one right here. It shall cover it. Okay, so I'm going to press that back, and then we can trim the block to the size it needs to be. Right now, it looks super, super wonky. So I'm going to be doing 6.5 by 10.5. So my paper is mostly here, except for this lovely corner right here that came off. Again, phone book paper is really easy because it, just comes right off really easily, but you don't want it coming off while you're doing it. So we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a ruler. Here I have a 6.5-inch ruler. So I'm going to use this to lay on here from the front side. Honestly, this was my point right here. And I'm going to go to the center of that, just like this, and see where my paper is. Where's my white? Yeah, it's going to go right here. All right, let's cut off the one side first. And then we're going to lift and adjust. Just like this. So all these pieces can go in my crumb bin. And now we're going to take it to this other side. I'm going to line this up. It's going to be 6.5 by 10.5. So I'm going to cut this bottom. I'm going to be making quite the mess. I'm going to cut this side now. Okay, and then I'm going to go up, and then we'll cut our 10 inches off of that when we get it high enough. Goes with my crumbs. This is going to go with paper trash. And then we're going to find our 10.5 on here, like this. And we're going to line this up on 10.5. I made a straight edge down here, so I'm just going to line up the 10.5-inch line. Make a cut. See? Then I'm going to line up my 10.5-inch line on this side, because I didn't grab a nice big ruler to do this. All right, so this will go with my crumbs. And here is my block. So I'm going to try not to put any whites next to the white. And then the paper is just going to come right off. You can leave it on as you go, but again, this paper, the phone book paper comes off super easily. I'm just going to take it off now because it's literally coming off anyway. So there is my paper off of it. Just like this. And here is my block. Just like that. I'm going to go ahead and slide all this into the trash for now, and then we're going to move on to another block. So I'm literally going to do that same exact procedure again. So I'm just going to put this right here in my corner, find a position. It can go up this way, it could go this way. It doesn't really matter as long as your point down here is about center of it. So I'm going to put that one first. And I'm going to go ahead and put this one here to the center. So here's the center of that. Go ahead and place a pin in it. Just like this. And I'm going to sew down here all the way to the end, and then we'll cut that excess off. All right. I'm going to remove my pin. I'm going to fold the paper back very carefully like. We're going to cut our 1/4 inch seam. Pretty much is already there because I had straight pieces to start with. And then I'm going to go press this back. I'm going to cut off all this excess because it is not needed. All right, once that is on there, I'm going to go ahead and grab another long piece somewhere in all this. Go, there's a long one. And now I'm going to cross it over. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to cross this over and come down to this right here. Okay, and I'm going to stitch down this line. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin right there for now. I'm also going to cut off all this excess because I don't need it. That go back in the bin. And now I'm going to sew straight down this, and it's going to cross over and create a point. All right. Before I do anything, I'm just going to fold this back, chop this excess off real quick. My 1/4 inch seam. And then I got to pull this away and chop that end too. Go. Now, open it up and press it back. So I'm just going to take it to the iron and give it a press. And now, same as the previous piece, now that I've created my point, and you're going to see that we're going to be making stars, as you can see. Now that I've created my point, now I just need to keep going on both sides. So I'm literally just going to find strings that cross, and I'm going to sew onto both sides. All right, block number 2 is ready to trim. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the bottom right here. And we're going to cut our 6.5 by 10.5. I'm just going to line this up now over here. So I'm just keeping a nice straight line. I could see right there, right there. Here we go. ahead, turn it around, trim this side. I probably should grab out a bigger ruler, but you know me, I'm just lazy about that kind of stuff. All right, so now we're going to turn it to 10.5 inches. So I'm just going to come down here to the bottom, line it up at 10.5. Here. Make that cut. Straighten that out right there. It got a little wonky. And come over here. 10.5, 10.5. Nicely lined up, and everything looks straight right there. And let me trim this nice and straight one more time. There we go. Now all I have to do, clean up this disaster. I'm going to move those out of the way. I'm going to rip the papers off. I don't have to at this point. I could leave them on, but I'm just going to get rid of them now because it's just a disaster. All right, phone book pages are gone. And there is my block. So again, this is a very messy project, but we're going to make it work. So here's block 2. If I put them together, they're not going to be equal. I don't want them equal. This is messy, wonky. That's the goal of this. I was trying to be centered with that, but it's just going to be messy, wonky. Messy, wonky. That's the goal. So now I have 2 more to make. So I'm just going to stack these out of the way. I'm going to do that same procedure. Just going to lay it. It doesn't matter again if it goes up like this or if it goes down. These are in opposite directions, so technically you're making 2 this way and 2 this way for your block, because we're going to make 1 block out of all this. So I'm going to go ahead now and grab a piece. Honestly, if you keep starting them all on the top one, that this should be a little bit more equal, but you know, I just do things harder than I'm supposed to. So again, crossing it over that center. I'm going to throw a pin in here. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to just chop that off now. Why? Because I can. Let's just lay this tiny little guy on here. All right. Move that out of the way. Now, lay this on here at the point, cross it over, throw a pin in it, and now sew it. Okay. Just gonna turn this. Oops, move the pin. Pin first. Cross that over. Chop this excess off. I'm going to go ahead and press it. And now I'm going to cross that over now with the other side. Go ahead. I'm just going to grab a nice long piece. And it's going to cross over at that point right there. Here. And that's crossover line. There we go. Go ahead and chop off that excess. Throw a pin in here. And I'm going to go ahead now and pre-cut away this excess as well. Oh, let's sew it first, then cut it away. Very carefully, like. 1/4" ruler, add a 1/4 ruler, whatever you want to call it. Slide the excess off. And we're going to take it over and press. Go ahead, reach into the bin of scraps. And we're just going to add to both sides now until the whole thing is added to. So in this one, in very rare instances, my piece didn't come to the end, so I just added to it. Guess what? It's not going to matter because it's a string quilt. So just going to pull the paper off this last one, and then the blocks can get put together to create one block. Let's just get this paper off of here. And then I'm going to press them all real quickly, and then we'll put them together. All right, so here's my 4 blocks. We're going to lay them like this and like that. Oh, wow, did I screw something up? I probably did. There we go. Yep, I messed something up. You know that happens. See, it's supposed to be like this. So this one will go towards another one because this one matches this one. And there's no way to flip it. See, this is what happens, and this is why it's strings and scraps, and it doesn't make any matter that I messed it up. So anyway, that's the whole goal right there. So I need to make another block that comes out to the side right there. So I'm going to go ahead and make that block, and then we'll put the 4 together. Okay, now, now I can put this together into a block. So here is my a wonky block here. So now I'm just going to sew these together, and this will be my block. So I'm just going to put these right sides together, just like this. And I'm going to sew down this side and then sew down this side and then put them together. The 1/4 inch seam. Okay, and they're going to be a little bulky, but that's okay. So I'm just going to push this one to the one side and this one to the opposite side. Like I said, it's just a little bulky, but with the iron, it should lay flat. You could press them open if you want, but again, I don't think it's really going to be a big deal. So I'm just going to have them going opposite directions. And now I'm going to sew this seam together. Okay, so let's press this and see what our block looks like. And here is my block. Again, nothing matches. They're wonky on purpose. When all of them together, the overall look will look really cool because it's creating a secondary design. So I'm going to go ahead now and sew just a bunch of these. I'm going to take all of my papers, all of my whites. Obviously, I have more to cut because I'm going to go a lot bigger than this. And I'm going to make a bunch of blocks. Now, I'm just going to try to remember myself that 2 will be facing this direction, okay? And 2 will be facing this direction. So I'm going to always remember that as long as I have blocks in opposite direction like this, so I will do this way, and then I will do the ones this way. As long as they're in opposite directions, then it won't matter what's top or bottom because it's the same exact thing. This one is the same on this, is the same on that. So I'm just going to go ahead and prep these and cut them all and get them all sewn up, and I'll meet you right back here and we'll see what we can do with the layout. All right, so when you're making this, I have a couple tips for you. First tip, when you cut your 2.5 by 8 inch pieces, I'm just going to keep it stacked up. I have 8 of them stacked here. I'm going to take a ruler and I am going to take a cutter, and I'm actually going to come right above this point right here at the bottom, and then I'm going to come almost to the center. So I'm going to line it up right here and almost to the center. I want mine to be wonky. That's the whole purpose of this. So that is now garbage. And then I'm going to go the opposite way, except I'm going to leave about, I don't know, almost a 1/2 inch right there in the center. So I'm going to go ahead now and just line it up down here and cut it right there. And I'm going to pre-have my pieces already cut for me. The purpose for this is when we put these on the paper, I never seem to remember which way they go. So this is how I'm going to remember. 2 pieces are going to go this way, like this. And what we're going to do is I'm going to sew them on without sewing them on. right here on the paper, I'm just going to take a couple stay stitches so that I remember where it's going to be. And you can make your star point go whichever direction. If you want it to go up here or way over here, that is totally up to you. So I'm going to lay this on here. I'm going to grab my paper and I'm going to stitch that corner with just a stitch to hold it in place, because I'm messing up, and this is how I'm making it not mess up. So I'm going to stitch these where I want them. Again, they can go in whatever angle you want them to go. Just put that center of the bottom right here, the center between the two places on this corner right here. So 2 will go this way, and 2 of these, where's my, oh, there they are, right in front of my face, we'll go the opposite way. So I'm going to put one this way. Again, I'm putting the center, or center-ish, because they're wonky on purpose, right there. And then I'm going to sew a little stitch across that bottom. It's just holding it in place. It's literally like 5 stitches. So I'm going to have that one and one more facing this direction. And when I pre-put them on here, then I could chain piece all of the, well, sort of chain piece. I'm breaking thread, obviously, but now all I have to do is, here's a stack to make one block. So I'm just going to attach a bunch of these like that on here. So I need 4 more pieces of paper. And there's 4 more. So 2 will go one way and 2 will go the other. So I'm just connecting it right here. Again, it can face whatever direction you want it to face. That part is up to you. This is your quilt. So I got one this way. And then another one is going to go on here. Just getting a couple little stitches so that it does not come off. It might rip off, but I want it to stay temporarily till I start building on it. Now I'm going to go on the opposite side. Again, it doesn't really matter which way it lays. And I'm within a 1/4 inch of the corner, so I'm not going to have that stitch in there anyway. It's going to get cut off. And then I'm putting this on here. Again, it doesn't matter if they're wonky, because that's the whole purpose of this quilt, is to have fun with our strings and be wonky about it. All right, so that's how I'm keeping these in order. So I have obviously a whole nice stack to get started on, and a nice stack of paper. I'm going to pre-put all those pieces on my papers, but I wanted to give you the next tip for trimming your blocks. Here you can see, you probably saw it when I was making the blocks earlier and I started to trim. This right here is washi tape. So washi tape is a peel and stick with no sticky residue type of tape. So I could peel it, and I lined it up because I needed to make sure I stay on the 6.5 each time. I lined it up right here on the 6.5, just like this, all the way across. It's on the 6.5. So that way, when I'm on the back side, this is a 10.5 inch ruler, and there's my 6.5 inch mark. All I have to do is line that washi tape up to the edge of the paper when I go to trim it, and then I trim top and bottom, turn the whole block, line up the washi tape to my nice straight edge, trim top and bottom, and then I have my 10.5 by 6.5 inch block, and it's really easy by using the washi tape. So if you have a ton of washi tape, then this is the great thing for you. And just so that you can see, washi tape comes in many colors, sizes, and shapes. These are the ones I use for rulers, so that way they're bright and shiny and I can see them under any of my rulers. You can see I've previously marked other stuff for other projects, but I needed a 6.5 inch line. And to say you were using a bigger square, you can mark your 6.5 here, and then you can mark a tape piece along your 10.5 inches. So that way, all you're doing is setting it on here, and it's like a template. You're only following that. And then you can just peel it off when you're done with no sticky residue. So there is tip number 2 for these blocks. Tip number 3 is leave your paper on until you're ready to sew them into blocks. So leave the paper on until the very last minute when you're ready to turn these into a 4-patch block, which would be this right here. Then it's easier with paper already ripped off to sew them into your 4-patch. So leave the papers on until the very end and then rip it all off and then sew your block together. Yes, it's going to be stretchy because these are now bias and they're wonky bias. So some of these are super crooked and some are not. I also, since I pre-did all the whites, I kept the stack like this so that I can equally do 4 at a time and have an equal number over and over and over again. So there's my next tip. Leave the paper on until the very end, or else things are just going to get stretched out of whack. And then another tip while we're here at the ironing board, do not use steam when you are using paper because it will curl it up. I use steam at the very end, but I'm a steam girl. I love steam, so it's hard to avoid it. So make sure you turn your iron steam all the way off. This would be on for steam, and this would be off. So if you have an iron, mine barely has any water because I'm not using steam, but make sure that you turn the steam off so that it doesn't continuously steam while you're working. And then just make stacks, and when you have enough of them, put them together into 4 patches and move on to more. And my last tip here, honestly, don't be afraid to make a mess. I want as many scraps as possible, but I don't want a bunch of repeats in the same block. So this one accidentally had repeats in the same block. This fabric is the same as this fabric. Now that is uncontrollable, but when it's mashed all together into a lot of blocks, you're really not going to notice that. But I want as much variety as possible. So don't be afraid to take all your strings out and just start grabbing. You can use repeats per giant block, but I'm trying not to have too many repeats in the same area. So just watch for that, but don't be afraid to make a mess of things because this is how you find scraps to use. But don't be too picky about what goes where. Just throw it on there, and you can see right here, I didn't come all the way to the end, so I improvised and put that in there. But you know what? Who is going to know when the whole quilt is together? So don't be afraid to make a mess. Your sewing room will not be happy, but it's okay because guess what? We can clean it when we're done. So to speed up this process, literally I am just taking one of these and then I'm finding a piece that goes from edge to edge. So I need something long. I just try to find all the really long ones. So here's one that's going to go all the way from this side to that side. So I'm going to put it right sides together on here. And I'm literally going to start from here and make my way that way. And yes, I'm using the machine to where the foot is on the one side. 1/4 inch all the way. Keeping it straight. Once I have this one on here, I'm just going to clip off any excess right here and now get it done. And then that piece is on there. So I'm just going to set it aside. Well, technically set it aside. I'll attempt to grab another piece. And I need something that's really long. So here's one that's really long. Just going to grab this. Going to make sure that it covers all the way. Give it a snip. Line it up on here. And you can start at whatever end. So like if I want to start at this end, I just need to make sure that it's sewing straight by the time I get to my center point. So you can see starting on this end caused me to buckle on this end. So now that end piece, I'm just going to pop it off so that it's not wrinkled when I sew on the next. So I just go through one right after the other, and then I'll press them one right after the other, and so on and so forth until everything is done. The only thing I'm watching for is I don't want white fabric next to white fabric. So I'm trying to pull bold colors to start. So I want bold colors to be my first color. That way, every single one of my centers stand out. So if the next one I want it to be a white fabric, I will. I'm not putting any solid white or really any solids, period. I'm mainly just trying to use prints here. So that way I can get a lot of these prints used up. And I'm not just using little pieces. Here's a big, fat, chunky one. I'm going to use this one too. I want as much variety as I could possibly get throughout this whole entire project. So I'm just going to line this up on here very carefully to sew this way. I don't want it to bow down here. So it kind of bowed a little bit. That is why I'm sewing from the opposite end. But that's okay. This one's just tiny, and that really just comes unstitched because it only needs to be down for your first stitch. So I'm just going to continue on until all of this is sewn on here. See, like this one's kind of light. I won't put that one first. But this one is really dark. So I'm going to put this one on here. Doesn't matter which side you start on. Honestly, it doesn't at all. So I'm just going to start on whatever side I feel like it. And if it's too much hanging over at the start like this, I'm just going to go ahead and trim it off. Not level with the block, but these can always be that last and very corner piece. So I'm just throwing those aside and just sewing it just like this. So I'm going to do this until this whole entire stack is done, and then just keep moving on and moving on until I have every single pile completely done. All right, so now that this is sewn on, I just want to show real quick that there is a little piece. Remember, we had about 1/2 inch right there. 1/4 to 1/2 is pretty much where you want it. We need to make sure that our next piece crosses that. So let me just review this real quickly. We got the first side on. It didn't matter what side it went on. But I am now going to be crossing this. So I need a piece that's going to be this length, but you can see it's going to cross over now, fully cross over. And I'm going, this piece, if it would have been bigger, would have been easier because I would have had a 1/4 inch hook all the way down. But I'm going to go ahead and just use this piece anyway, since I need to show you how this works. I'm going to go ahead and put this on here. And if I need it to fully cross over, but I need it to hit right here, I'm going to angle it just a little bit. This is highly important because you still want to grab this piece right here. So I'm going to put it about right here. I still have a nice point, but I'm also crossing over right here so that I don't have a gap. And I'm also touching right here. Just like about right there. I want to make sure that I'm hitting the whole entire thing. So this is highly important. Whether that centerpiece is big or not, I hit a 1/4 inch all the way down. So I grabbed this, I crossed over that, and yes, this is skinnier, but it's only a little tiny bit skinnier. It's not a big, big deal. So I'm going to cut that off, and I'm just going to keep going ahead and sewing all these. This one's going to cross over, and it probably won't even grab, but you could still add another piece to this side and this side and this side until it is proper. So I'm going to show you that real quick. If you don't want to cut off too much of that, go ahead and add another piece. This is going to ensure that my other side will get grabbed. I'm going to go ahead and slide this under, sew this on. So if you have too much of a gap, go ahead and do it this way. So now when I iron this back, I am guaranteed to add this piece on. Let's just grab a a piece of fabric here. When I go to add this piece on, now it will cross over and grab all of it. And then when it's opened up, you'll still see that piece right here and this, and it'll grab everything. So you can do that if you want. That's another tip. Or you can cut off the excess. And then I would just go through like this and not cut the paper, but only cut. We don't want that much of a seam allowance in there, so get rid of that. So that choice is up to you. I'm probably going to, on bigger ones like this, I will just cross over. So let me find a piece of fabric to use. So this one, if I go over like this, it crosses over nicely and it still grabs. So I'm going to go ahead and just cross this one over. And then the skinnier ones, this crossed over, see, and it made a full piece. And then the skinny ones I won't. It doesn't really matter as long as you're getting it on there. So that is on like this. And then we have the big one again. So here's another big one. Let's find a, that's not long enough. Got to find something that's long enough to cover from one side to the other. This one is long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and lay this on here. I also want to make sure when I lay it on here that when I fold it back, it covers all the corners that it needs to cover. So this one, if I fold it, it's going to cover everything, and then the excess on the bottom I don't need. So I'm going to start on this side, cross it over, and in doing that, you're going to have a bulk right here. So this is going to get folded back. This bulk right here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the excess right there because that's a lot to throw away. I'm going to cut the seam allowance side first, and then the paper side should just rip right off. So this one is, you can keep these pieces if you crumb piece, or you could throw them in the garbage. We're going to be cutting those excess off just like that on all of them. So here was this one. I'm literally just cutting crumb pieces, obviously. I'm cutting the seam allowance first. This one's a small one. And then the paper just rips right off right there. Try not to rip the paper totally in full because that also makes a mess. So these we sewed onto the same side. So I'm going to have a bigger chunk when I sew the opposite side on here. Let me show you what that looks like by pressing this real quick. Let me just place those aside. So let's sew something onto the opposite side. Let's use this one right here. So I'm going to lay this on here just the same. Lay it on, cross it over, and you can see it's going to cross over perfectly. I also use the edge of the fabric as the guide, not the previous seam. So there is this. Again, I'm just going to cut this right here, right to where it hits the edge of the paper, and then that tears right off. So there is that piece. And now it's ready to just keep adding on both sides. And I really just am going to chain piece all of this. So here's a crossover one. I'm going to cut all these away after I chain piece the whole lot of them. Just pop those off. I'm always making sure I got my point. This one's a skinny one, but that's okay. I think this one was the skinniest. I don't remember. Either way. So I'm just going to keep adding and keep adding until I can't add any more. So let's see. Let's find another one. I'll show you one more time. Let's open this up. Cut what I need off. Put this right sides together. I'm going to make sure it's crossing over right here, lining up with that edge right there. And I'm going to sew it on. And then I can see that I have some of this white right here. I'm just going to get rid of that without cutting the paper. It's just extra seam allowance. You can leave it if you want. I'm going to make sure that this point grabbed, and it did. It caught it. There's no gap there. And then this piece just needs this little tiny, tiny spot popped off, just like that. And then that one is ready, and it gets rid of all that corner bulk. So I'm going to continue on until all of this is done again. Okay, so here's the part where the marking from the washi tape helps. So you're going to take a block, I'm going to place it upside down. I'm going to find my white, which is right here, and I'm going to put that in the first top corner, right here. I'll line this up. You can see, I don't know how well you can see, but the paper is beyond that white line. And I have it marked at 6.5, and then the ruler itself is 10.5. So I'm going to cut and cut like this. Then, when I turn it around, all I have to do is line up the washi tape, which is 6.5, to the paper, like this, and then line up the bottom, make my cuts, and there is my 6.5 by 10.5 inch. So the washi tape really helps with this step. Grab another one, lining it up. I'm always putting the top corner up in the corner first, or in this corner or this corner, so that you can see the corner where it's going to land. So I'm going to line that up, make my cuts, turn it around, line it up with the paper. Sometimes the washi tape will hit it just right, but I didn't layer it. I only put one layer of tape on there. Sometimes it'll hit it and it'll bump right up to it, and that's where you know to stop. And then make my cuts. There that is. It's actually a lot easier, I think, to have it marked. Here's one where it's right here. So I'm going to put it down close to me. That's where the white is. Right there. And it's right at that tippy point. Make the cuts. Turn it around. Oops, and the paper got stuck right here on my tape. That's funny. Lay it back down. Washi tape's touching the edge of the paper, and I don't got to worry about trying to, oh, there's the 6.5, you know what I mean, each time. I just have the tape there so I can find that 6.5 inch mark a lot easier than not. So there's another one. Let's do one more. It's down here in the bottom corner again. So I'm going to line this up down in that bottom corner. If you used regular paper, it'd be the same exact thing. Remember, if you do use regular paper, to start with a piece of paper that's 7-ish by 11-ish. If you start with your 6.5 by 10.5 inch piece of paper, you're going to knock yourself off a little bit, because the paper is not going to stay 100% straight. It is going to get wonky. So just so you know, from sewing all these on here and then ironing and then sewing and so on and so forth. And then every 4 blocks, every 4 of these will make a big block. That's our goal here. There's that. And if you have a grandchild or child or niece or nephew, or even your husband or wife, if you're a man, who wants to tear all the papers off for you, You can tear all the papers off. I've been tearing them off before sewing them together into a block, which again, I'll show you right now. Each block is right there. There's the block. And again, the points are not going to be perfectly matched up because we didn't piece it that way. It's wonky for a reason. This quilt is meant to be funky and wonky and have fun with it. So that's going to be a block. And again, I'm putting them in sets of 4 to make it easier on me. It's best to trim from the back side too than the front, I think, from the paper side. It's easier to see. And remember, when you're done doing this, you'll need to change your rotary blade because you've been cutting through paper. And even though I'm using phone book paper, paper is paper no matter what. So you should change your rotary blade. And I'll do that when I'm done with this whole entire project and done playing with paper. It's also best to change your needle on your machine, which I probably should have done, but I haven't yet, and I should do it again when I'm done with this project. But we have a lot of blocks to make, and so I'm just going to be doing the piecing of these blocks and trimming and sewing them together until it is all complete. You can make as many blocks as you want to make the size quilt you want, but I always make big quilts, so the bigger the better. So I'm going to keep making blocks until it's the size I need it to be. There's 3 and 4. I'll lay these 4 so that you can see 4 more. 4 more together like this, and then I peel the paper off before I sew them together into this. Look at that. They look so cool, don't they? All right. So for now, I'm just going to keep making blocks and then cutting them and making them and cutting them. And it's been a couple of days already, so I'll probably come back in a few more days when I'm done getting the blocks made and show you how we put this all together. All right, now we are going to put a block together, and I'm just going to give you just an overshot right here of how it's done. We're going to start with 2 pieces that the whites meet up like this. So you want your whites touching. I'm going to go ahead and put these right sides together. The first thing I'm noticing, though, after making all my blocks, I do have to say this, is I'm trying to make sure that none of the colors are the same touching. So when I lay out my blocks, I want to make sure none of these are the same and none of these are the same down here. So I don't want any fabrics that are the same touching. It doesn't matter if the next block has some, but this block itself, when you make the giant 4 patch, we don't want any matching colors. So this one's good to go. And I just put them in stacks of 4, honestly, where the colors are totally different in each of them. So I'm going to match up the ends. Literally just going to stick it under here. And sew it through. 1/4-inch seam. And then I'm going to grab the next 2 pieces, which are the bottom ones, hooking the 2 whites together. Again, they don't match. They're off. And that's fine because that's what we're looking for, is wonky and funky. All right, so I'm going to slide these under just the same as any 4-patch, making sure that my 2 ends down here are matching, and they are. And also making sure we get the rest of the paper off of here. The husband is the one ripping the paper today and yesterday. All right, so once those are sewn, I'm leaving them together, and we are going to take this top one, and I'm going to just finger press the white part to the right. And then down here, I'm going to finger press the white part to the left. Everything else I'm just leaving until I get to the iron. So now I'm going to put them right sides together. Literally just have to match the ends. They are all exactly 6.5 by 10.5, so everything should land equally on all the sides. Put this under. So this, I'm going to hold this seam. This is stretchy. All of this is on the bias. You can see I'm able to stretch it really easily. So just be very careful. Stop in that seam. Line the bottom part up, making sure everything lands nicely. Sew the rest of the way down. And now all I have to do is take this to the iron and force press all this seam to one side, all this up, and all this to the other side. That way everything is nice and flat. So let's go to the iron real quick and do that. So for pressing, like I said, I just start by doing this while it's folded in half. Give it a little bit of heat right there. Then I peel it open. This seam, I made it go this way, so I'm just going to very carefully push it that direction. Then I'm going to push this up, and then this one goes the opposite direction of the bottom. And once that's all out, like I said, this is very stretchy, so be very careful when you're pressing not to distort it. Just very carefully. You can see I'm going outwards with the strings because that's the way the strings are straight grain. So it keeps it from getting super wonky, but there is a block. So I'm going to set that aside. Grab another one. Like I said, it's really simple. Just give it a little heat right here first. Opening it up. This seam is going, which way is that pressed? Finger pressed this way. So I'm just going to push this seam that direction very carefully. Then I get to this top section. I'm just going to press that seam up. And then this one is obviously going the opposite direction. Once all those seams are pressed, then I'm just going to press the rest of the block. I'm literally pushing out with the straight grain to keep everything nice and flat. You shouldn't have a problem with that. There we go. And that one's perfect. And you see, these don't match up. And you know what? That's okay. That's part of the fun. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep pressing all these. You pretty much get the point. I'm just going to heat them, fold them back, push the seam the way that I made it go, which is this way. For some reason, it looked like it was going the other way. Push it that way, push that this way, and that one, like that. And then just go with the grain of the fabric to press the rest of the block out. And I will repeat that until all of my blocks are pressed. And the next step will be to put them up on the design wall. Okay, so originally I had planned for 160 blocks. So that's 160 of just this section, right? And I was going to go 16 across, 16 of these across. By 10 down, which would be 10 of these. So that would be 4, 5 down. Anyway, but then I started making it and realizing that's going to be 96 by 100. That's perfect for a queen size quilt. That's like the perfect size. But after sewing and sewing and sewing and more sewing, I decided to stop. I made 100 pieces, I think. So I made 100 of them, and I'm going to do 6 of these across the whole unit, 6 across by 4 down, which is technically 12 across by 8 down. So 12 of these across by 8 down. So we are going to lay mine out because, again, I stopped. So you really don't need 2 1/4 yards of the white, but I have more cut if I want to keep going and make a second quilt. I have plenty to do that. Like I said, I always over measure and give you guys over measurements, which works perfectly because if you want to make the big full queen size one that's 96 by 100, go for it. But I'm just trying to give you guys a video with an idea, and this idea is shown whether I made 100 blocks or 160 blocks. So, all right, so we're going to lay this out now. 6 big blocks by 4 blocks, and you're going to see what it's going to look like because it looks really awesome. So let's get to that. So now all we have to do is sew all this together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you in time lapse, and I'm just going to piece it together because it's now rows. So these are giant blocks, really easy to do. It should go together nice and quickly because it's a big block. So I'm going to put it together in rows and put the rows together in, get it done in time lapse. So here we go. So it's together. It weighs too much. The sheer amount of fabric used caused this in the size that it is to way too much for me to get it to stay. It's sort of staying, which is good. But honestly, I think I'm just going to go quilt it. So I need to make a back, and I'm going to use my leftover block and figure it out into the back of the quilt. And that, my friends, is how I am going to finish this quilt off. And I'm even going to use scrappy binding. So again, it's 6 big blocks across by 4 down, which is technically 12 of these single units that we made, 12 across by 8 down. So however which way you want to look at it. I call this Xploded. Xploded because my strings have exploded in my room. So I'm going to go ahead now and get this back made and get this quilted up, and then I'll show you the final quilt not hanging in here because it's not going to stay on the wall. It's too heavy. Anyways, see you in a few minutes. And here it is. It exploded. Look at that. Wonderful, wonderful quilt. This was so much fun to make. I love scrap quilts. I enjoy making them. I also, went a little bit further and did a scrappy binding, but who doesn't love a scrappy binding? I used all scraps except for the white, and I didn't even use much of that. So this is what it turned out to look like. I love it. I love it. Anyways, you want to take a look at the back because I did something awesome with the back as well. Oh, and I should tell you, it's got an all over meander because I just wanted to get it done for this video. So like, done. because it exploded and I wanted to show you. I know, I'm so excited about this one. But anyways, let me turn this around so that you guys can see the back, and then I'll insert some still images of the finished quilt. And oh, when you see the back and you see my tag and my date, just remember this video has been filmed in 2025, so March of 2025. I finished it in March 2025, but the quilt says otherwise because I forgot to change my embroidery machine. But hey, whatever, it still says I finished it, still says all my information, and the name of the quilt, Xploded. So let's take a look at the back. Didn't I say this was awesome? So this is what happens when you let your creativity flow. I just took a 108 and I chopped it up and inserted this and then sewed it back together again. Bam, done. So there's what it did. You can't see it from there probably, but I'll bring the camera close and do still shots. It says Xploded, and then it says designed, pieced, and quilted by very own me, but then it says March of 2024 because again, that embroidery machine and me, we're not friends. So I got to change its date. Anyways, so I'm going to come ahead and show you what it looks like, and then I'll insert some still shots. So enjoy. Hope you enjoyed this video. Wow, I can't talk. Shucks, I'm in my pajamas. It's time for bed. It's dark outside. So let's get to finishing all this up. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye. I'm always forgetting things. It's 79.5 by 71.5. 71.5 by 79.5. Whatever. It's 72 by 80 by itself, but then I lose when I quilt. So that's where that came from. So 71.5 by 79.5. So there it is. Okay, I just had to add that real quick, but it's done. Let's look some more. Okay, I'm off. wanted to add one more thing. I hope you have enough scraps to make this. And if you do, share it on social media and I'll see it. I'll see it. I will. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.